she with you?
I thought she was with you.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Holding Court with the Nerd Queens. We're here with our girls from Snyder's Amazons, and we're also here with our friend Sean O'Connell.
Hello, ladies. How are you?
We're good. How are you?
Oh my gosh, I'm thrilled to be back. Can't believe I'm back so soon.
Well, we're glad that you're back so soon. So we've got...
You had so much to tell us, so, you know.
We ran short on time.
I have even more. I have plenty more to discuss.
So from the Amazons, we've got Adrian, Kat, and Meg, and Danny just jumped in. Hi, Danny.
Danny?
Having a little audio issue
Hello?
with Danny, as per usual. Turn off your camera, sweetheart.
I hear echo.
Okay. So, who wants to go first? Who has questions for Sean?
Well, I'd love to know, I know you can't talk about being on, I don't know how much you can say, but I don't want details about the film, but I guess just what it was like maybe to be on set with Zach.
Uh-oh.
We all know he's a great guy, but like, what can you tell us about what that experience like? What was the atmosphere?
You want to talk about Justice League or you want to talk about Army?
Either or both, or compare the two.
Let's. Okay. I'll compare the two. That's a little bit better. I can do that without getting into any sort of specific details about Army of the Dead. It's still under embargo.
Right.
Yeah, no, of course, we understand that.
Sure, of course. When we went to Justice League, Zach was very much juggling a lot, spinning a lot of plates, trying to maintain a massive tentpole blockbuster. And so we were watching him film the scene on the rooftop where Commissioner Gordon summons Batman, essentially, and Batman shows up with Wonder Woman and Flash. And in the middle of the version that we watched them shoot, Cyborg shows up later to interrupt the conversation and talk about an attack that happened at Star Labs. I don't think that's how it plays out in the theatrical cut. I'm pretty sure it's different, but I don't remember specifically. I try not to watch the theatrical cut.
That scene was ever there.
Is that scene not even there? That's funny. Oh my gosh. So,
well, there is. There is a version of that scene, but it's different from what I remember.
Okay. Well, at this stage, they're definitely trying to figure out what the parademons are, and why they're here and what they're looking for. And when Cyborg sort of shows up and talks about the attack at Star Lab, they're starting to put the pieces together on the mother boxes. So we watched Zach shoot that, but most of that set was going around and visiting the different departments, costume department, art department, visual effects, to get an idea of, what they were building toward. We got to see Flash costume, the costumes for the Atlanteans. We saw concept art for Cyborg, obviously, because so much of it on set was just a body stock kind of thing. And then we ended up getting Zach at the end of the day. And it was the time that we spent with him in that was up in the war room where now remember, at this stage of the game, he had released BVS. He was halfway through, I'd say, production on Justice League, and was trying to get the word out that he intentionally was going in a different direction for tone on Justice League, that he needed BVS to be serious. He was treating Justice League as a get the team back together, or get the team together, to fight a bigger threat.
Okay.
And so he was very convinced, talking about doing that. On Army, he's a totally different guy, and from this perspective, so much stuff has happened to this guy, in between, that the way that I can sort of describe it is that he felt on Army like an indie filmmaker, just bounding with energy and laying on the, we're in a oh God, what can I say? I keep forgetting. I can't think of it. But he is like laying on the floor in the middle of big scenes that another director. Here's a contrast. On Justice League, he was behind a wall of monitors under a tent, like I've seen several other directors do on big blockbusters, where they're removed from the action. You know, they're directing from a distance. When he wants to go talk to the actors, everything shuts down because there's 30 to 40 people who are involved in the set in particular.
Okay.
Versus what I saw him doing on Army, he's immersed in it. You know, like he's in charge of every bit of it. And
how exciting!
And yeah, and I think it's exciting for him. You know, like I think it's. And one of the things he said in an interview, I don't even know if I can say this. I can't say this. I can't say anything. But
no, it's okay. Be careful.
I get the impression, and I think he might have said this. He might have even said this in another interview. Like this story had been developed for a long time, and he almost didn't direct it, right?
Okay.
And I think he was developing it for another director. And then he kind of realized, like, he'd put so much work into it that he was just like, oh, I'm just going to do this, you know? I'll just do it. And that kind of energy, that kind of enthusiasm, I think is bleeding through into his process now. And that gets me extremely excited about what we're going to see, because I think you're going to get an unfiltered Zack Snyder.
That's really
and who
We are always here for that one.
We're expecting Unleashed.
that sounds really exciting.
Well, he's getting back to the zombie genre, you know, and and again, I won't even say this about Zach, but I'll say this about other filmmakers who are able to work with Netflix. Netflix is giving them creativity that doesn't always come with the studio system. Now, the trade-off might be that you are not going to get the theatrical release that you used to get. And we're seeing this with like Scorsese and The Irishman. And some people are saying that's a travesty. But what they're letting you do is make the movie that you want to make in almost every instance so far for the streaming service. And I believe that's going to happen with Zack and Army.
That's really exciting. I've been excited for, we've all been excited for Army. Even I have been. I'm not big on zombie movies anymore. Like I've outgrown them a lot. But for Zach, I will definitely watch it, and it sounds like I'm gonna love it.
I hope so. So does he.
Yeah. Sean, have you ever seen that interview with Zach oh gosh, who was the actor? Was it Gerard Butler talking about how Zach was all, throwing the spear on 300?
Yeah.
I don't think I have. No.
I believe.
Oh, look that up, because he talks about how, Zach is just a really physical guy. I think he's always that kind of involved and energetic and stuff. So that's really awesome to hear. We all want to hear that.
There's so many things I want to say to you guys, and I can't. But there's something that I can't. I don't think I can. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I hate this more than anything, believe me. There's nothing more frustrating than an embargo, because even things that are not specific to the plot at all, and not specific to what we learned, like there are details that we learned on set about Zach and his process that I know that you would all love. But I don't know if I can even reveal them, because I just don't think I can say anything that I learned on.
Okay, well, we'll write them down.
And save it for later, because good things come to those who wait. So
for sure. And again, I need to, so much of this is that Netflix trusts us when they invite us to this stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
I need to adhere to that. And it's it's nothing that's gonna, and it's nothing that's gonna shake the internet or by any stretch. But I'm saying, as Snyder fans, there are things about his process that I learned on this movie that sort of reference what you're saying with Gerard Butler. That I think when you guys find it all out, you're going to be really, really hyped up for this.
Nice.
Well, I think we already are hyped up. Anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
So to move forward from that, thank you for all the info, by the way. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
So, you've recently bought this really cool T-shirt.
I'm wearing it as we speak.
You had some questions. Do you still have any?
Well, I mean, yes. Yeah, I still have a lot of questions about it.
Okay.
Perfect.
So I've been told that this diagram maps out the 5-film arc. Is that accurate? Or is it just supposed to be JL 1 and 2?
I believe we think it's the 5-film arc, I believe.
Yeah.
That's my understanding.
The belief is like the middle part, basically the sword part going all the way down to the baby. It should be the 5-film arc, when obviously the logos around for Wonder Woman, Cyborg, Flash, and Aquaman also symbolize, the standalone movies that should have happened and in some cases did not happen yet.
Gotcha.
I still love that Cyborg film. Like, I'm going to be waiting on it.
You and Ray Fisher. Yes, so images on this shirt that confuse me. Okay, so of the 5-film arc, does that start with Man of Steel?
Yes.
So that would be Superman at the top, then theoretically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, and I said this on the other podcast, the two pillars to me clearly designate, the two worlds of Clark Kent. One looks like
a high rise, and the other looks like it's from a farm.
A field, yeah, a farm, a field. His two worlds essentially, Metropolis and Kansas, divided, and in between the Daily Planet or a planet, but also it reminds me of the Daily Planet logo. Where I start to lose it is as we continue to go down the logo, and you get the words like, betwixt and between and onward and inward. Like, I don't know necessarily what they could mean. I don't know how anyone could actually clearly interpret what they mean. They seem so vague to me, unless you guys have theories or ideas.
Well, I mean, there's the entire Vero account dedicated to so many theories, so you would probably spend hours reading up on it. I mean, there are so many different ways to look at it too. Some people went to the Bible for references. Some people went for tarot cards, like me and Cole. We made there was this reference. I mean, Cole, you worked on it more than I did. That was especially for the 6 of Swords or 7 of Swords.
The 6 of Swords that were coming out of the Cortland part with the Omega symbol. Because there was some skepticism that it had something to do with that tarot card specifically. And
I just assumed that was the 6 members of the League. Is it not?
That's the easiest way to look at it. Yes.
Yeah, and also now that we know there were supposed to be 7, so.
So that traces back to Unite the 7.
Yeah, exactly. Which every time I hear that, every time I bring that up, people always look at me funny because, they're like, why do I feel like I heard that before? I'm like, that's the marketing that strangely disappeared out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. It was so early on. Yeah. It was so early on.
Yeah,
when you look at it, so you got, obviously, they all 7 swords. There is 7 swords because the main big sword that goes through is the one with the Superman logo on top. And then you've got the smaller 6 swords around there. But all 7 of them, it sort of feels like it's like a key to, defeat Darkseid, because you have the Omega symbol on there. And all those swords are going into that.
Now, the hilt of that sword starts at Superman's logo. Could that mean that he's the main sword?
That's what we feel like it's been implying, because as you go down, it seems, because there was a reason why Zack started with Man of Steel. Like, there has to be some sort of reason other than the fact that he just loves Superman.
Yeah.
And it also goes like, there was also that came after the shirt was out, but there was the event which we call SnyderCon, but it was the director's cut event, and he spoke on what kind of plans they had when it was, still to be 5-film arc, and a lot of things that they spoke of were related to the nightmare scene that we have seen in Batman v Superman, where Bruce has this really strange dream of this post-apocalyptic world. And in that dream, there was a hint for anti-life equation. So I think that's all connected sort of thing, that like that big sword is Superman because he's like the kind of the main line throughout that story arc. But it's also because it's going to be like his story on an even bigger level. Like we saw him die in BVS, or however you want to interpret it. Now, as we spoke to last time and we discussed this, we don't really know how he was supposed to come back.
Right.
So I think that like that's another reason why we can't really interpret it directly there, because we don't know. There are pieces missing still.
Here's a fun theory. This is a fun one. Because the Superman sword, as I will now call it, goes directly into the Wayne casket, right?
Yeah.
Which you can read that that means that he somehow kills Batman.
Well, actually, the fandom seems to have identified that what it looks. So you see, it goes into the Wayne casket,
Right.
goes down to show Batman. You see what looks like sperm coming down to a baby.
Right.
And so the fandom has identified what a popular theory that basically that Batman would sacrifice himself to save Lois and Clark, and they would end up naming their child after him.
Okay.
Because again, we go back to that nightmare scene where he tells Bruce directly, "She was my world."
Right.
And
then
there was a lot of emphasis on this. Lois Lane is Superman's world in this matter of things. So a lot of his actions and a lot of stuff is going to be revolving around her, and she's very important in his story. And there was, and I believe Zach somehow, like, I'm not sure if he confirmed it directly or if he just hinted at, like, sort of that this was the way it was supposed to go. But yeah, Bruce was supposed to sacrifice himself to save Lois. And then her and Clark would have a child, name it Bruce, as his legacy.
And you know what? Like, dream sequences are dream sequences. And to me, I find them to be incredibly lazy in movies, in any movie, you know? Like, it's a way of sort of putting an idea forward, but then it's so easy to be like, it's a dream sequence. But what I loved about BVS is the next step after the dream sequence. Like, the nightmare sequence people love because of its aesthetic and the way that it looks, and it's so totally different. It pulls from some of the pages too, and it showed us like what could happen.
It raises the stakes, yeah.
It's the inclusion of Flash traveling through time.
Yeah, and he says he was
that makes it way, way more interesting to me, because it's laying groundwork. Like, that scene cannot exist without Zach saying, we're going to pay this off later, but here's a fucking awesome tease, right?
Yeah.
And you have to be patient. You got to be like, what? Why? How did that just happen? And it's more, to me, important and relevant than a dream scene, because it's something that tangibly happens and has to be explained later. And part of the tragedy of what happened is that we don't get a chance to. What's the broken link off to the side?
Well, the broken link, you mean the one on the right-hand side?
Yeah, well, yeah, on my left.
Broken piece of chain.
Well, it depends how you look at it. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I think the most common interpretation I've read, and the one that I even like that kind of occurred to me as well, is like broken chain, broken link, sort of like a freedom symbol.
Mm-hmm.
You know, symbol of freedom, of new life, and it's between Aquaman and Cyborg as well. So it kind of fits to the story that like both of them, you know, go with. Because obviously Cyborg has to find himself again and find, you know, a way to deal with his new life. Well, which the same goes for Arthur, really, because obviously then we follow up with Aquaman, where he goes on to be a king of Atlantis, and it's a big change, and it's a change in life.
Do you ladies think we were going to get other villains in the 5-film arc?
I think so.
Yeah.
I feel like that we would have if they didn't, because I don't remember exactly what was said because it was in a Vero comment. Maybe you girls can help me out, but it was something to do with how Wonder Woman was supposed to kill. Was it Steppenwolf or was it Darkseid she killed?
Steppenwolf.
Yeah, and she ripped his head off and like tossed it into the next century or whatever. And
not century. Yeah, it was supposed to roll down to Darkseid's feet.
Okay.
Yeah, wasn't that Zach's comment? Was he uses gods to kill gods?
Right.
Yeah.
I
want to see that.
I love it.
It's supposed to be the whole Darkseid family. We now have confirmed that Desaad was cast. So
there was supposed to be more than just Darkseid, but also like I could totally see him throwing in some other stuff just for fun. I mean, he already teased us the League of Villains start up with Deathstroke and Lex Luthor.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I was just curious.
Girls, you've been so quiet. What do you have anything to add? Anything you want to talk about on the shirt? Any questions, comments, concerns?
I'm just drinking this all in. It's so cool to like hear someone else geek out about stuff. You know, I don't know. It's just cool.
Speak up.
Well, I think too about the just the symbols in general is that they can have more than one meaning. Like they can have different shades of things. Or to try to think that we have to just pin it down to one thing when you have like this complex story, I don't think that that's necessary. You know, that it can have multiple meanings.
And unfortunately, what you'd know through multiple movies that have to sort of tie into a bigger, like if some of these solo adventures were going to be held in between different Justice.
Oh my god!
Hi, Kissy.
She's being super loud. Sorry.
She's so loud. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I'm so sorry. She's so loud.
She's interested.
She is.
Factor in the things that like things happen to slow movies up. Like I think about Flash. Like if they were at some point going to try to bring in the Flashpoint storyline or use Flash's ability to time travel to reset parts of things that happened, you would have needed his movie to arrive at a very particular point, and that solo movie kept changing directors, and poor Ezra, who's been signed onto it for God knows how long, he's going to have made like 3 Fantastic Beasts movies in between.
Yeah.
He's waiting for his chance to play Barry Allen again.
Yeah, he's not giving up on that one, which of course we love him even more for.
Right.
Yes.
So, all that stuff is really difficult. And then, you wonder how different the Aquaman movie might have been had they been able to continue, or if there were other things that they would have had to accomplish in that film.
Mm-hmm.
I think the plan was...
The thing with Aquaman was, though, I think we've pretty much all of us seen that Jason Momoa is like the biggest warrior when it comes to Snyder Cut.
Right.
I remember before Aquaman came out, he was in some interview, he was like, yeah, it follows up from Zack's Justice League. He just went out straight said it like that.
Yeah.
He had
I admire him so much for that. I admire him so much for that because he's still a company guy for Warner Brothers, clearly they're going to make another Aquaman movie. And clearly he respects the people that he's working for at the studio at that level, for sure. But he will not back down from his loyalty to Zack, and I admire that to no end.
Yeah, he's walking a very narrow line, and he's happy to do it.
For sure. Yeah. And you know what? Like, someone threw Gal Gadot a little bit under the bus on social media of how come she hasn't said anything? And I don't think that's fair, but because I think Momoa is very happy to be outspoken, right? I think he's very happy to defend Zack. And she doesn't necessarily have to take a stance one side or the other. But I will say, with each passing day, it's getting a little bit more curious why she isn't saying something.
It's somewhat curious, but when you look at the fact that she's also that the Wonder Woman role is not just for the movies with her, she's also a goodwill ambassador to the UN. She's also all of these things because of Wonder Woman. And
right.
we would hope it does seem like she still supports Zach, of course, but it seems like everything that came with being Wonder Woman, especially being this like breakout role for a female superhero, it may be a bit more harder for her to speak up as much as everyone else.
Maybe. But you know when it's going to happen? It's going to happen on the Wonder Woman 1984 press circuit, for sure.
Oh, yes, it is.
Oh, hopefully. I'm really hoping that she can find a way to say something, because, like, we have no idea what kind of NDAs that these people are under.
Right.
Yeah.
And I see Gal as being caught between, two people she feels indebted to. I can see her feeling indebted to Zach and also Patty. So she has to, who wants to choose between their friends? But it would be really great if we could see, as much support for Zach as, as him. Yeah.
He was on set at Wonder Woman 84 when I first started filming, so that's always a very positive thing to remember, because obviously him and Patty are still tight, and him and
I'd say, yeah, everything I've heard from Patty is that she's still super supportive of Zach.
That's what I always say. I try to explain to people when they say the other directors in the DCEU seem to have forgotten Zach, or they seem to not like him or anymore or something. But that's never seems to be the point of it all. It's like they're keeping everything going by doing their own movies and their projects, but they're still supporting him when they get the chance.
Well, I think nothing would make everyone who's currently involved in the DC films happier than if we were able to move on. Like, I think we had a conversation the first time that I joined the show, which is in best case scenario, we get Snyder's cut released, right?
Yeah.
And we know that even if it teases future things, they're probably not going to go, back and restart the timeline where they take the story from wherever Zach was going to do it and finish it. I think the battle is to get the Snyder cut released, but not to resume Zach's vision, his ultimate vision, because I almost feel like we're too far down the road in terms of the solo movies sort of branching out and doing their own thing. Arthur Curry's obviously on his own path now. They'll continue to make Wonder Woman movies that potentially fill in the gap. With this Joker origin story getting close to $1 billion, it's going to change how Warner Brothers approaches these characters. And I think the idea of them trying to do an interconnected universe a la Marvel is just not going to come to pass anymore. But they can't fully move on to this is how we do it now phase until they put a period on the sentence and have some closure and release this version. And it's now to the point where we keep talking about it so much out loud, and major players involved in it, who were part of it, the Momoas and Gal, if she ever does come out and talk about it, of the world, where the longer they wait, the sillier it feels, because there's no reason anymore to wait. It doesn't feel like there's a reason anymore to wait.
No, not when they regularly release director's cuts, and then it's like, this is fishy. Why aren't we getting this one?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, and then what Jason told us in that interview with MTV is that he's seen it in the VFX. He didn't flat out say it like it's done, but you can kind of.
The way he looked.
That look is it's done. Duh.
Well, somebody they were like, why would you think that Zach would, finish it?
Not finish it, yeah.
And I was like, well, of course he would. This was his passion project. And if he got, if it got taken away from him, but he had, almost all the elements that he would need to complete it, right? That's what he does. He's a filmmaker.
Right.
He's going to sit there and put it together to the point where he's happy with it. And I don't even think it's that far-fetched that he's reached his own pocket and spent money to fix it, to finish it, or to rely on, the kindness of people in the industry who've worked with him. I can say this from the set. This doesn't reveal a single thing. Everyone who works on a Zack Snyder movie is his family. They are all family. They're not related. Mm-hmm. They are indebted to this man. They love him. They love him. and all they want to do is contribute to his vision, no matter what he's doing. Having been to 2 Snyder sets before, it's all the same faces. You know, he works with the same people, and so in the downtime, in the interim, he's calling in favors. I guarantee it. You know, I don't know this from any. I can't say this with any.
I don't know that he has to call him. I think everyone,
everyone's been offering.
Yeah, look at what all of us.
Yeah,
he didn't have to call us.
So that's my belief. My belief is that in the 2 years or 2.5 to almost 3 years of downtime, of course he would pick it up and tinker with it. Of course he would.
Yeah, and it's the thing that he's most passionate about is filmmaking. And even though he was recovering from a loss, you know, that's what you turn to when you're trying to cope with something. You turn to what makes you happy.
Right.
Well, and I think Zach would want to do that for all. Like, I think of him as sort of like, you know, like he's got this whole team. He's got an army behind him and people that trusted him with these roles. You know, he brought them in, and I think he feels an obligation to all of them. You know, everybody's looking to him. So that would make total sense to me.
Well, I also think in the moment when this happened, you know, yes, Zach stepped away because of a tragedy in his family. There's no question about that. But I think at that point the studio could have done one of 2 different things. And again, this is all just me pure speculation. You know, analysis based on what I kind of know about the industry. They could have said the Snyders had a huge tragedy, but we 100% support Zach's vision. We're going to move off of the November 17th release date. Justice League will come out the summer following. And we're going to give him the time to, you know, to step away, to heal, and to come back and finish his vision, right?
See, that's what I think would be the most. That would be the most. The best idea, and also the one that would have been the most understandable, because it would show they cared. Like the decision they went with showed they didn't give a shit.
Well, no. I think the decision that they went with instead proved that they wanted to change gears. That they wanted to shift out.
Yeah, definitely.
They took advantage of it.
But
so
they
now,
just chose really, really shitty time to do it.
Yes, they did. No, they did. And in hindsight, it's easy for us to look back and say, well, that was a terrible decision, you know? Like, that really didn't work out for you. And if it, and we say this, we're all playing what ifs, you know? What if that version that came out did gangbusters box office, right? What if it just crushed? Then Warner Brothers would have been able to say, we were right. We were right to switch gears. And this would have been, you wouldn't have this, you'd have a much smaller component of people saying, I still want to see what Snyder's version would have been, right? But because the theatrical was so bad, was such a Frankenstein monster, and just a disaster, that I think that's what fuels people being like, there's got to be a better version of this story out there somewhere, you know? Like, so much went wrong in the theatrical that we have to kind of see what Zach wanted to put out in the first place. But no, when they didn't, I mean, movies get delayed all the time. We can go back and single out multiple tentpole films that, whether it's for reshoots or just, you know, the date doesn't line up anymore, or you don't want to compete with something, so you get moved back. It happens, and it's not the end of the world when it happens. So if they truly wanted to support Zach's vision in that moment, they would have given him the time and told him to finish it, and they would have put out Justice League. Because, you know, from a studio perspective, it doesn't matter what month you put out a Justice League movie, it's gonna suck up all the oxygen in the room. You know, don't try to tell me, no, we got to keep that November date because that's when people want to. Don't get out of here. You put it in the next summer, and it'll dominate. But by not giving him that time, they went, no, we're going to change gears and we're going to go for a lighter tone. And, you know, people didn't respond to BVS, so we're going to give them our Marvel version. And they hired Joss. Of course, you hire Joss because you want to give them the Marvel version.
Yeah, but we didn't like the Marvel version.
I hate the Marvel. I hate that version.
It didn't work.
Also known as the dumpster fire.
Yeah, it's so cheap.
It even like retconned some of BVS. Yeah, go ahead.
No, what I wanted to say is because obviously that we started off, and I mean what you said, Sean, about how they decided what they did and what it meant. I mean, I think that we are all pretty much aware of why they did what they did, but I think that this moment, the fact that they did it because they had opportunity in such an unfortunate time, such a bad time. I think that was the initial spark for this movement to even exist. Because, as you said, Zach, the people he works with, they're like his family, and he treats his fans the same way, and we don't forget that, and we will stand behind him. And even back then, so when you have things like this happen to someone, that you see that is genuinely good person, you kind of like take a step back and be like, okay, this is not right. I'm not saying that the movement would, grow the same way it did because of everything, because of how Justice League bombed, but I think it would still be here because obviously this kind of thing that has been done.
Well, and this is why it annoys me to no end. I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to cut you off. But this is what annoys me to no end when you hear people on social media. And again, the message I'd like to keep getting across to the people who are fighting the really good fight, to get the Snyder Cut released on social media, is that, and this has happened a couple of times recently, when you engage with the people who deny it, or try to speak out and say, oh, this is ridiculous, and then you engage them, you're just giving them, more. Who was the guy who interviewed Jesse Eisenberg recently?
Oh, gosh.
The one,
I don't know who that guy was, but it did look cringy.
that guy was a masterful troll. Like, he played directly into or out of the troll playbook, which was bring up the Snyder Cut in an effort to get a reaction. Then when he gets the reaction, he goes, oh, somehow I've fallen into the Snyder Cut conversation. Well, it's not somehow you've fallen into it. You brought it up, kind of thing, And then he had one other post too that came after it that I was just like, stop feeding into this guy's thing. But the point that I think that people overlook who don't understand the movement is that it's so much more than the movie. Like, yes, we all want to see the movie, but the movement is special because of the awareness that it raises for much stronger causes. Mm-hmm. And I find those stories to be the most uplifting and inspiring. Beyond, like, so many people are like, why would you even be interested in seeing like a longer version of Justice League? And it's like, it's not just about that, it's about so much more at this point. And I'm constantly trying to educate people on that whenever I get a chance.
Well, I felt, when I saw the theatrical cut of Justice League, I felt like the rug was pulled out from under me. Everything that I loved about Man of Steel and BVS was sort of wiped out. And then, and BVS means so much to me. And then I ended up on Twitter and meeting other people that felt the same way. Like, BVS meant something to them. It spoke to them in a certain way. And we were so hyped for Justice League. And then to find that it's just so not the same kind of film, not the same caliber. It just, it left us empty. And so, yeah, it's about, we met other people where, these films and Zach's art and these stories meant something to us. And and then to find out all the stuff behind the scenes and more about Zach and et cetera, and it is more than just wanting, an entertainment film that, we didn't get. And also BVS is my favorite film of all time. This isn't like something I just casually liked. Like, it affected me deeply, and I absolutely love it. So it wasn't like, something on a tangent, or something, minor. And to have met other people that it means the same thing to them. We were already fighting, the BVS backlash kind of, and having to justify that. So I think that laid the groundwork for all of us.
Yep. No, I know. And then you get a movie that you're anticipating, with every each passing day, and it ends up becoming an insult to something that you hold so dear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's painful.
This was just so spot on right now. Yeah, that was an insult to everything that we were hoping, and it was just bad.
Well, what other questions you guys have, ladies? What else can I get into?
Well, speaking of favorite films, and I wanted to bring this up because this is I guarantee you this is a conversation that will wake up everybody in this podcast room. Man of Steel.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
No.
You set yourself
already...
up for that one.
Oh, ladies, I'm out of time. I gotta go.
But you know what? We've seen that you criticized certain particular elements of Man of Steel. So let's talk about that a little bit. So what was your biggest issue with Man of Steel? And did you not like the film in general? Or was it just certain things? And, let's talk about that.
While I'm doing this, I'm going to see if I can pick up my initial review of Man of Steel. Because I'm pretty sure that my grade was like 3.5 out of 5.
Okay.
Last time we talked, you seemed to be a big fan of Man of Steel.
Yeah, I like Man of Steel. I don't love it.
We love it.
Ladies, behave.
That's my favorite movie of all time.
Of all time.
That's
favorite
gonna eat you
movie
alive.
Of all time. So I'm just going to take a deep breath.
Well,
Kissy, leave the room.
so here's the deal. And I'll go full disclosure, and I'll give you let me at least give my background to this, at the very least.
Of course.
I grew up as a Marvel kid. Like I read Marvel comics. Those are my characters. Spider-Man is my favorite character of all time.
We noticed.
I had a passing knowledge of DC, but my DC knowledge came more from the movies that I grew up on, which would be the Donner Supermans, the Burton Batmans, and things like that. Then we got into Singer's Superman Returns, and I completely understood the criticisms to that. And so around that time, I started listening to a lot of Kevin Smith podcasts. And he was the one who said, I went to a Superman movie and he never punched anybody. And I never even thought about that. But once he said it, I was like, oh my God, that's right. And he's like, and it's Lex Luthor and real estate again.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, that's right. Like I was still kind of forming my creative or critical skills at that point. So I was like, yeah, that's right. That's a terrible Superman movie. Although I loved everyone loves the space shuttle airplane rescue. It's a thrilling sequence, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's actually the only scene I like from Superman Returns.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the only scene I like.
The rest of it's horrendous.
It's
a mess. So I understood the reaction to Man of Steel of we're going to put a lot more action into it, right? And I responded really well to the action. But there were moments throughout the formation of Man of Steel where the way that Zack circumvents a traditional structure, it knocked me off guard from the get-go. Like you start with an older Clark at this point, essentially. And he, tells a lot through flashback after the Krypton setup, obviously. You have a wandering Superman who is saving people but hiding his identity.
Looking for himself.
It's jarring. Yeah, you have to admit, it's a jarring way to get into a Superman origin. And they start doing flashbacks, and we start to learn about his struggles with his powers. And I'll single out the scene that still knocks me for a loop. And you guys know what I'm going to say.
Go right ahead, because we would like to show you our thoughts and such.
Of course.
So go right ahead.
And listen, when everybody debates me on this scene, and so if anyone's listening to the podcast and they have not heard me on social media, and I'm the father of 2 boys, and so maybe this hits me a different way. Mm-hmm. Every single time that I watch the scene where Clark talks to Jonathan Kent and says to him, should I have let that boy die? I pray that somehow Kevin Costner says, of course not, Clark. You should never let someone die. Of course not. it's such a simple way for a father to I think as a father, I'm constantly trying to instill my values or values into my children. And if my child ever said, alien child, powerful child, any child, if the line is said to me by my son, should I have let that person die? My immediate reaction is, of course not. You don't let someone die. You do everything you can to help. And he says, maybe. I thought
that's that's completely understandable. That's how you would look at it.
Sure.
But when we were talking, when Nana and I were talking to Jonita. I don't know if you're familiar with her work. She's another reporter we spoke to last week. And we were discussing that exact scene because you had just popped up on Twitter arguing with folk about it, or debating. And one thing that I realized I felt pretty strong, like that scene never really bothered me because it reminded me of my own mother. My mother was the kind of person where she would say, you should always help other people, but if it comes between you and them, I want you to save yourself type situation.
Right. Sure.
And that's how I was raised. So, but after seeing you're upset about it, we discussed it on the podcast. And the one thing that I keep going back to is that it's the most rational thing for a parent to say. And Jonita, she has 3 kids herself as well, and I asked her as a parent, how do you feel? And she completely agreed. So I think when it comes to that scene, it's not really a question of how it was written or what have you. I think it's more of a question. I think it's just the difference between parenting styles and how we perceive things, or how we are raised as human beings. There are some people who would think that it was stupid that he tried to save anyone at all. And some people would think he should do everything to save them, and some would think, make a choice, protect yourself. And that's what
For sure.
So
I think it also speaks to I'll go real fast.
No problem.
A deliberate choice as to how Zach wants to approach Superman handling his origin. And I'm going to refer more to the original Donner and some of the books. It's been pointed out, comic panels that show Jonathan Kent clearly saying to Clark, no, protect your identity. But in my mind, Superman, very early on, came to the realization of, I'm really powerful, and so I have to do a lot to protect people, right? But in Man of Steel, he wrestles with it a lot longer than I guess I anticipated that he would. And that's just a deliberate choice of the movie. And the movie's not wrong for making that choice. It's actually a very interesting choice. Where you have this powerful guy going around protecting people and staying hidden, essentially, beyond, I'm going to move to Metropolis and put on glasses and people won't know who I am. And again, it's not a wrong choice. I just was not used to it, and And
you weren't feeling it, and that's completely valid.
Well, and I have definitely come around. I mean, I've watched Man of Steel a ton, and I'll be honest with you, I'm much further into it now than I was the first few times that I watched it, because those things were so against what I knew about Superman growing up. And so it's just different, which is fine. I mean, it's okay.
Well, I see that scene as, they're both not really serious. Like, the issue on the table is Clark's, powers and identity getting out and the consequences of that. So even when Clark says, he doesn't say, this kind of earnest, well, Dad, should I have let him die? It wasn't like an honest question like that. It was like, what am I supposed to do? Let him die? Of course I can't do that. And I think, Jonathan is the same way. Well, of course not. But we have this other, I don't know, maybe because we have this other impending what happens when the world finds out there's an alien, so I didn't really take them both as in, as that earnest about that question, but like we're handling the bigger consequences of all this and how they're confronting that, not just, you know, whether or not, you know, he saves anybody. I thought that
so
there's like deeper. Yeah.
No, you're 100% right. But let's get into the tornado scene.
Okay.
Sorry, before we do that, can I just jump in? First of all, I have a response from Danny because she's on a what is it called, sound delay. So if she was to reply, she would be replying like 15 seconds after all of us. So we just do it that we read out her answers or questions. But before I do that, I want to just say I feel like what we said, like, you know, and what you said, Sean, that like, you know, that Zach was setting up the Superman story in a different way than you were used to. I think that that's part of the thing, and I've said it on this particular podcast multiple times to the girls, that this what I appreciate about Zach's work is that despite the fact that he's doing superhero films or, you know, in other way supernatural or other films, he's trying to make them real in a way. And I feel like not just Man of Steel, but also Batman v Superman, and I think potentially Justice League as well. Once we'll see it, we can judge and compare. But at least Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, they are dealing with that one particular question, and they're trying to deal with it the same way that I think that we would deal with it right now in real time as people on this planet, and that's, should there be Superman? It's the whole thing, you know, there is Alien. How would people react to him? And when you look at the current situation in the world and how we are as a humanity and everything, if you think about it, if you look at Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, I don't think it would be that different. And maybe that's why, you know, it, like, that's probably why it starts off from the start like that Clark is in the hiding and he does all this stuff from secret. And that brings us back to the thing that Adrian pointed out. It's not just about, you know, should I have let those kids die, but what should I do? You know, if that makes sense.
Sure,
I think
100%.
I think that's a problem a lot of people have with Zack's Superman, is that it's putting us in the right now, this modern, it's basically a modern day Superman. We're not in that golden age of comics where the ideals and everything were super easy. And it challenges you to think about it in this modern, crucial way. And some people just don't like to think so, you know, so, like, don't like to think that, oh, we have to think about it as if it's happening right now. Like, they'd rather sit back and have a movie that's so fantasied up that you can't even compare it to the real world.
Right. No, this is a post 9/11 human trafficking world, and where are superheroes in that?
Yeah.
Okay, but
And what Danny says, and sorry to jump in again, but what Danny said then was, especially Jonathan in cinematic and comic book has a line where it moves, protect an alien Clark and teaches him how to be human. He is a farmer and he is raising a child that could be pointed, imprisoned, and killed, not because Clark is it's Kryptonian, and he can't get hurt. The approach Man of Steel is down to earth. More than that, it humanizes Clark and so sort of unifies both sides of him. Kal and Clark were so clearly separated in the past, and what I feel is that he became incredibly relatable more than ever because of how he was portrayed in Man of Steel. And she also said it's not weird as a parent to say to a son, be kind to others, do what you can, but as safe as possible, doesn't matter how strong you are. And at the same time, there is the moment where children can make their own choices. So it was her take onto this scene before we move forward.
I will argue that I don't want Superman to be humanized.
You know, that's fun. That's totally valid, you know?
I want Superman to be the ideal, so that once we recognize that he exists, he's automatically inspirational.
But I think Zach did a good balance of humanizing him and making him an ideal.
Eventually, but it took 2 full movies to do it, though.
Where does he make missteps? Like, when is he not ideal?
When is Superman not ideal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he's being questioned by Congress when people are constantly threatened by him. And I know that that's a realistic position for him to be in a modern society.
But that's a fault of us, not Superman.
Yeah, that's not Superman's fault. It's external factors. It's not him himself.
No, right, exactly. I would prefer a world on screen where recognition of this ultra-powered being was more awe-inspiring than inspiring dread and fear. Now, maybe that's not realistic, but that's it. Through two movies, his existence, both in Jonathan's actions and particularly in Bruce Wayne's actions, led to he exists, so we must fear him because he might be really dangerous to us. And that's a tone that I didn't necessarily get into.
But I think in the films you see both reactions. You see humankind respond in two different ways to Clark.
Some in BVS for sure. Like the Mexico City rescue. Is it Mexico City where he flies off to?
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
They're in awe of him as a god. Holly Hunter's character is doing everything in her power to take him out, essentially, or to get people against him. There's a lot of people who are trying to work against him.
I don't think I'd agree with that at all. I think she just wants a conversation.
Yeah, I don't think she was against him.
Are we talking about the senator? I'm sorry, I don't remember actors' names.
Yeah.
But like she said, like she's asked, must there be a Superman? And she just says there is. So we need to discuss this, and that's a very telling moment for that character. But no, like what they were saying is that we see them both we see both sides of the argument react to in awe and also in terror, and it's totally cool. It's totally fine that you don't understand, like you understand it. Sorry, that's wrong wording, but you don't like it, and that's okay.
No, and that's not even true. I hate that it's an A or B. It's never an A or a B, right?
Well, no, it's just I'm trying to understand. Sorry.
Of course. No, and listen, the fact that he's trying all these different things and the fact that we're still discussing them years later is proof that he's achieved a lot more than people give him credit for, because there are different interpretations of classic characters, and I think they're constantly, worth discussing. But that's what
I
makes
have
it
a question.
Fun. Yeah.
Did you ever get to speak to him about it?
No, I never did. I've never.
If you had a chance, would you?
Yeah, sure. Of course I would. If we ever got a chance to do a big, long sit down and get into the details of, I feel like I got a better grasp of what he was trying to accomplish with Superman in particular in the director's cut, extended cut of BVS. There's a lot more to Superman's motivations and to the world's reaction to his motivations in that extended cut of BVS.
Well, the ultimate cut was definitely better than the theatrical version. I mean, it just like portrayed a whole different picture. I mean, there was really not much to tell about that. Like, there was half an hour was extra to it?
Yeah, so. And it was crucial character development.
It was, yeah, because what we were, it just changed the whole tone about Superman's story in BVS. It changed completely the whole story arc about it, because in the theatrical version, there were just, like sort of blank, empty spaces where you were questioning, like, okay, what exactly is happening? But then when the ultimate cut came out, it was just like, oh, this makes sense why that would happen. Especially at the beginning with that dessert scene.
Yes, exactly. Yes, 100%. And that's why, and this is what's most frustrating to me, is that the Ultimate Edition of BVS improved Man of Steel for me. And I just know that the Snyder cut of Justice League is going to make all three of them connect and make more sense. It's literally like stopping a story, before you're able to reach the natural end. So it's even frustrating to get into some of these nitty gritty, details about like, well, this is how Superman's portrayed, or why did he make this decision at this point? Because Zack clearly had a journey mind for the character, and until we see the big picture, the full picture, we can debate some of these smaller decisions. Like there's a scene with Jonathan Kent in the Snyder cut, from what I understand, where Jonathan could have said something to him that would completely clear up everything from Man of Steel, but we don't know, or I don't know right now.
And they're probably, we see Clark going back to both his mom and dad, even in BVS. So, right. There probably would have been a scene. I wouldn't.
I think that there's so much in the performances and in the nuances of the quiet moments. Like the things aren't always, spelled out in dialogue. I love the theatrical cut of. I fell in love with the theatrical cut of BVS, and then I feel like with the extended, I got more. Like when Clark is going and doing like, reporting in Gotham, that kind of thing. But I feel like it's all there in the performances in the theatrical cut. All the nuances are there for Clark wrestling with things. I feel like I see it. So I don't need anything like explained further, but boy, do I want more.
How about this one, ladies? What about when we tell you that General Swanwick is a Martian Manhunter?
I will forever be angry.
Is that going to change how you view Man of Steel?
Yeah, but only in good way. Like only in like good ways. Like there's
adding layers. Yeah,
I forget. I think it was Kat who retweeted it, but it was like someone on Twitter took the scene where in Man of Steel, Swanwick and Clark are looking at each other through the interrogation glass.
Yeah,
and
he was the only one not scared. Everyone was backed away, but Swanwick was right there, front and center. Like,
Yeah. Like
now,
what did I said? Like two aliens looking at each other or reflecting.
Let's go back to someone said post 9/11, world with superheroes in it. I'll tell you that my initial reaction to the Zod fight at the end, in the moment, really was, and again, not that it's anyone's fault. This is what would happen if two superpowered beings fought each other, but it's a shit ton of devastation, right? Like it's innocence, I would assume, killed as a result of this battle. And that's not something I'd ever seen happen.
Yeah, and that's what we see. That's what we see immediately in BVS. We see a superhero who had this entire fight, who destroyed half a city, pay for what he did.
Yep.
And then essentially that kind of, helps Lex in building that whole narrative that Superman, is dangerous, and build up that whole idea in Bruce's head that he has to take him down. But if we look at it from the actual real point of view, if superheroes were real, this kind of destruction would be very real as well.
Very true.
And we get to see the consequences. Like in Aquaman, like all that stuff washed up on shore and everything, and we never find out what happened to it. So the destruction is there, we just don't see it. Where I love that Zack is like, no, you're going to see it, you're going to feel it, and we're going to deal with the consequences and how it affects the characters.
Yep.
Like you get to think about it.
Yeah, he really confronts the real world consequences.
But I'm telling you, in the moment, and I'm being totally honest with you, ladies. In the moment, when you watch somebody try something that drastic, it's tough. It's tough to adjust to. It's not something you're used to seeing every day. And now Snyder gets credit, after the fact, because it is so outside of the box. But when you're watching it for the first time, it takes a while for it to process.
Yeah, I left Man of Steel going, that was intense. I mean, Feora's intense.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah. If the final battle was with Feora, she would have just killed Superman. She would have just killed him. If he didn't take her out soon, Zack didn't decide to put her in the Phantom Zone, like And if it was between Superman and Feyora, she would have just killed him.
Well, and the line that will always stand out to me in Man of Steel is when Zod says to him, like, where did you train? Like, on a farm? Like, he's disgusted by the fact that he even has to waste time fighting this guy who's such an amateur, you know?
Yeah, and that's another part of Man of Steel that I find that I love, is that he doesn't just suddenly magically become really good at fighting. He's literally, this is his first big fight, and he's literally throwing his body like he's acting like his entire body is a boulder that he can fling across the city at him. Like he's fighting like he's a newbie.
Yeah.
Right, because he's had to hold back for so long.
For so long, yes.
Yeah, that's the...
Listen, don't, please, the narrative is not that I don't like Man of Steel. It's just, it was not what I was expecting.
Right. But how wonderful.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, but like when we look at this whole thing, and you said, you know, it was outside of the box, and it is real in the way consequences come and all that stuff. Like you say, you know, this is what you didn't expect and what shocked you about Man of Steel. For example, this was one of my biggest problems with Endgame. I felt like the final battle, as much as fan appreciation as it was, there were no real consequences. I understand, obviously, yes, there was the death of Tony Stark. I mean, I'm sorry for spoilers, but if you haven't seen it by now, I'm like, sorry. But who else died? It was such a massive battle. Who else died?
Black Widow, but we pretend that
was
everyone
so.
pretended
I'm sorry, but that was so unreal. That was so unrealistic, and it just made me. At the end of the film, I was just like, where is the impact? Where is the, you know, this was the grand battle, the big finale of how many films, and who died?
Right.
You know, there were not even injuries. Like, you know, it just felt so unreal. It felt so.
I want more eye patches.
They were hurt feelings.
Feelings, you know,
and you know, when they're going for a 4-quadrant demographic, you know, it's like, that's okay, you know, but then I just don't want everything to have to be that.
Yeah.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
So ladies and Sean, before I leave, I have 2 questions for Sean. So you mentioned that you're like a big fan of the Donner films, and so am I, and it's something that I feel like is rare kind of in this fandom, I guess. But I feel like even that Superman has a very human side to him as well. He wants to be viewed as, you know, the friend of the people. So what's an aspect maybe from those films that you wish you would be able to see in like today's films?
I really like because Superman would be my favorite character in the DC universe.
Yeah.
And I love it when he is he's on a pedestal that society, you know, I like the era where people feel safer because Superman is our protector. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And the DC universe didn't get to that point yet for me, right? Like he wasn't allowed to be that beacon of hope yet. And I think he was getting there.
Yeah.
I think that was supposed to be probably one of the grand finale, like part of the grand finale, that he becomes the beacon of hope.
Yeah. As his circle increases, because he was for everybody that knew him. You know, like there's the bully that he saves, that he turns. There's the colonel. There's the United States government. You know, and all that stuff. Like it was snowballing to that point to where it would be global.
For sure, but to me, the calling card for Superman, as a kid growing up, was the wonderment of looking up and pointing at the sky. You know, and shouting. You know. Look up in the sky. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman. You know, like in a that's Mighty Mouse, but like in a here he comes to save the day type way. You know, like we're gonna be okay because Superman is here. And when the DC EU in its first two movies took a stance of largely, not from everybody, but largely, Superman's here. Oh shit, we're screwed. This guy's so powerful, we should fear him. I didn't like that as much as here's Superman, we're saved. Like here's Superman, everything's gonna be okay. Here is our protector. So I like that ideal of Superman. And if we were going to get to that, like it probably would have, and we're assuming, would have led to that third act triumphant moment in Justice League. And had it come organically, the way that Zack wanted it to get there, you almost have to get through Man of Steel and BVS to get to that truly transcendental. He's here now, now he's here. Now we realize what we lost and what the world has become without him. Because even in the Justice League theatrical cut, there is this sense of, the world is a worse place now, and we're lamenting the loss of Superman. And I do think, yes, it was building toward now we all kind of realize how important this guy is. And so I would love for us to get to that point.
Yeah, because otherwise, if you start off there, how do you make a 5-film arc? If you start there.
Agreed. Yes, and I think when Donner made his film, the idea of a franchise wasn't even there. He was just trying to make a Superman movie.
Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, and my last question is, so when we were talking about how Jason was saying that he saw the Snyder Cut, the VFX are finished, close to finish, whatever, why do you think Warner Brothers has such a hesitation, or, it's not really a hesitation, they just straight up ignore the fact that people are asking for it? Why do you think why do they think they do that? Like, obviously, you go to any Warner Brothers, any DC, tweet reply, it's all release a Snyder Cut. We want to see the Snyder Cut. Do you like? It's almost, it's humorous at this point, but why do you think that they just choose to ignore it?
The HBO Max in particular was terrific. Like that release was just hijacked by
exactly.
the Snyder Cut.
Feathers in our cap.
I really did, just envision this poor, early 20s social media, intern waiting with pre-timed, tweets that they had to drop about all the exciting content coming from HBO and just getting bombarded. To answer your question as honestly as I possibly can, knowing some people at Warner Brothers, like having friends on the studio side and also having friends on the side of wanting to see it, I have no idea now why they are not addressing it. It feels like it would make more sense for them to tackle it head on, and almost just not. It's not even admitting that the decision to switch directors was wrong. Like, maybe they don't have to even admit that, but at least just acknowledge publicly. I would like to see them. I think it would be a better PR play to publicly acknowledge that they hear this outcry, that they understand how badly a fan base that is supportive of an IP that they want to succeed, the DC universe, to say, even just to come out and say, look, we hear you guys, we're not ignoring you guys, but then for them to say, here are the reasons why we can't necessarily do it, right? Or here are the reasons why we're not able to, or we're hesitant to do it yet. Because I personally, this just could be me as a reporter, prefer transparency. I'd rather you explain to me why you can't do what I'd like you to do, versus just ignoring it altogether. Yeah. But I don't know that. I don't know their reasoning behind it. I've never heard anything from anyone of note that would tell me why they are not releasing it. I would always just think that it's ego. I would always just think that they have to
stick with the decision they made, which was to, release the version that they did. But to me, the media landscape changes so drastically, so quickly all the time. Mm-hmm. And there are so many ways for you to get out let's even call it a cult version, of a popular movie. This is an unfinished version. Put it on a DVD and let interested parties buy it. Mm-hmm. HBO Max, put it on a streaming service and use it as bait to lure subscribers. Like, there's so many ways to do it now. So I don't understand for many reason necessarily why they're still hesitant to do it. And maybe one day I'll hear a reason from somebody who knows it, and once they tell it to me, I might be like, oh, all right, now I get your side. But I haven't heard that yet, and so I don't know it, to be honest with you.
Cool. Well, if you ever hear it, share.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I think that is actually a good place to wrap this up.
Terrific.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you so much for coming back and chatting with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and if there's nothing else to add, then this is Snyder's Amazon signing off.